All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Prepper Talk Radio. And if you're watching us on YouTube or any of the other video platforms, you're going to notice that it's just me today without Shane and without Paris. Due to scheduling, we wanted to make sure we got this interview in because it is absolutely vital. Timing of it is great. And for a lot of you guys who've been listening and following for a while, you know Cidni, aka the Prepsteader. We've had her on before. We love her. She's amazing. And we had to do this long hiatus between the last time we had her and now because she moved. So we had to give her time to set up her new homestead. But I want to welcome her and let you guys all know she's back. So Cidni, welcome to the show.
Hi.
It's good to see you. It has been way too long.
It really has. It's been a long time. I think it took a year break.
Yeah. And now that you're back, you've got a lot of things going. So we're going to talk about that in the episode. We're going to talk about homesteading. We're going to talk about some of the things you've learned, your journey, but also a little surprise that we're going to talk about towards the end. But remind all of you guys listening, if you want to get involved, get more information, join our group, come to preppertalkradio.com, get on the email list. We've got some things we're going to announce here shortly. But also come join our group, Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance. You'll find Cidni's in there. You'll also be able to find Cidni at facebook.com. Go to the Prepsteader. She's got tons of followers, over 100,000, who are waiting to hear her next thing. So that's where you're going to go. And as a reminder, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at AMP3. Now, you've heard me talk about it before. I'm going to talk about it again. AMP3. Their website, amp-3.net. They are the best first aid kits that I've come across, and I don't even know how long. I've got a couple of my own. Keep one in the car all the time. It is all 100% American made. It's sourced in America, made in America, and they are fantastic, wonderful people. You cannot get better prepping partners in your life than Dave and Beth over at AMP3. They're giving all of our followers, all of our listeners, and all of our community 15% off if you use the code Prepper Talk. It's all one word. So head on over there, get yourself a kit. You will be glad you had it when you need it, and you will. Without further ado, let's jump in. So Cidni, you moved. You got a new place. You got goats all over the place. Tell me what's going on. Tell the listeners what's going on and how things are going with the homestead.
Yeah, so we moved. It took, I think it was a 2.5-year search to find the right property. A lot of thought process went into what property we selected because we wanted the positioning of all of the elements on our homestead to make sense. So I think my real estate agent wanted to fire me at one point. She was awesome. But we finally found the right one. And yeah, so now we have goats on the homestead. We are in the process currently of building the rabbit hutch area where we're going to be bringing on meat rabbits, which is another source of protein. Obviously chickens, which has been our starter animal. I think it's like the starter drug to homesteading. I think that's probably
the gateway animal.
That's the gateway drug to homesteading. Still canning away. We have so much more storage at this place. So it's been a nice change in pace of where we've been able to store stuff. And now I'm having to juggle the milking process and where to put all this extra milk. We are getting a gallon a day, and that's just off of 3 of our does. So it's been interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know you can get that much milk. I knew goats actually milk. They produce a ton.
They do.
They're so small is what's crazy about it.
And that's actually the interesting part of when you go into goats. A lot of people get stuck, and I did this. They get stuck on their patterns and moon spots and disbudding, naturally polled, like all of these different elements when it comes to goats. But if you're going to go into dairy goats, you need to take a step back and figure out, is it the breeding aspect? Is it the show aspect? Is it meat that's more important? Or is it truly the dairy? Because if that's the thing you want to focus on, you want to focus on milk line, the shape of their udders, their nipples, their teats is what you actually call it, not nipples. Focus on those things. And then you also look at what type of milk testing what type of milk they have. Our girls specifically, they have A and B milk type, which has the highest butterfat content. But there's also a type of goat milk that you can get that actually is better for people that have a sensitivity to proteins that can't do those butterfat contents. So there's a lot to think about when you're going. Yeah. So there's a lot to think about when you go into dairy goats. And that was a big reset for me personally.
That's crazy. I grew up, my cousins had dairy goats. And I remember my aunt would always say, I can get more goat out of a milk pound per pound than I ever can out of a cow. And I was like, bull, that's garbage. And I lived next to a dairy. So I went over to the dairy and I asked him, and he's like, oh, yeah, pound for pound, goats win. He's like, but I can out earn anybody with goats because I have cows and I can produce more. And I'm like, fair enough. But
Yeah,
there's so many benefits to goat's milk that cow's milk doesn't have. And so
that's
that's
true.
one of the things on my list when I get out to a homestead. I want goats. Like, is that kind of why you chose goats? Was that you knew about the health benefits, or what was it?
It's a combination. So first, I think I mentioned this on the first time I was on your show, is when my first homestead disaster was getting a cow on the half acre that we got. And we tried to do dairy cow
I remember.
on our half acre. So that's what completely put the cow dream to bed. But then also, when my second daughter was born at the height of COVID, when this shutdown started to happen, we had a bit of a frenzy issue. I couldn't get formula that was good enough for her to keep down in her belly. She had major digestive issues, and I had to buy from Europe to get goat's milk because that's what she could process and handle that I could also find. So we had to import
Wow,
goat's formula from Europe. And so that's what got me really
that's
looking
horrible.
into. Yeah, it was awful. It was terrifying, but it was good. We got through it. And yeah, it's kind of a combination of those two experiences. That's what got me looking into the health benefits of goat's milk and how the molecules digest different than cow's milk because they're bigger.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating because it's like I follow a lot of different people all over social media, and everyone has experts of areas of things that they know really well. I found you because of your canning, and I was like, holy crap. And I got to know you, and I'm like, oh, it's way more than canning. You do so many different things, and the goats now is something that's on my radar because the health benefits of goat's milk is fantastic. The maintenance of goats seems a lot better to me than anything else. And worst case scenario, you can eat them. Right. So there's benefits every way you slice it. There's benefits to having goats. How much, like, do they take up a certain percentage of your homestead, or, and what's the schedule like with having goats?
So we're still getting to know this herd. So we bought this herd from Zygote Farms in South Texas. So we bought 3 of her
Okay.
does, and the sire, the baby goat, is from another section of her herd. So they're not related in any way. So we're figuring out the breeding schedule. We have all of their, 2 of our goats just went through heat, and then 1 is going in heat in about 2 weeks. So we have not started breeding. And what I want to have is spring babies. I don't want to run into issues with late winter freezes that we get typically here in Texas. And I definitely don't want babies dropping when we're dealing with 100-degree weather, which is also a thing we deal with in the summer. Everyone's breeding plan is different. That's what our plan is. So that's why we have the wethers to keep the buckling and separate where he's not alone. So that's why we have the wethers. But as far as the space they take up, essentially we have 1 pen that's going in over here. It's already 3/4 the way done. We have to finish off one side. So that's where the bucks are going to go. And they're going to take up probably, I'd say a third of a section that's going to take up, and it's going to run kind of where the goats all the way down from one property line to the next. So they probably take up another third, and the rest is going to be garden space. Chickens are going to be incorporated in all of these spaces because we're going to rotate their grazing. And then the rabbits are going to go in my husband's area. So his shop is right over there behind me. So he got commandeered.
So you've got it all planned. You got the goats, you got the chickens. You're going to be expanding the gardening. With picking all this out, like you mentioned, it was a long process to find this property, and your realtor wanted to fire you.
Yeah.
What were the big elements that you had to have? Like what were those key factors?
So the last property we were on, we inherited from family. So we didn't really get a say. We were very, very blessed in that regard. but we didn't really get a say of how it was positioned. If there was a flat plane that we could work with. There was a septic on the property that ended up being aerobic at one because we had to replace it. And that's all that we could get was the aerobic system, which took up a huge section of all of the animal area. So there was a lot of factors that went into that, and it was very narrow. So when we started looking, we wanted to make sure that we got whatever we got. We were aiming for 3 acres or more. That's not what we landed on. We landed on 1.5 is what we were able to purchase. But we made sure whatever we went with, it had to be a well laid out property, not too narrow, not triangled off in the back, not running through any weird sections where you couldn't really get to it because of long hills or anything like that. We ideally wanted a creek, but that just didn't work out. So that was number one, is just positioning of how we could work all of our systems and that they could work together. For example, where the goats are, where we're going to be able to back, we have a drive gate. It's going to be able to back right up into the garden so that all of the compost that we're going to bring out from the goat pens is going to go right into the compost pile, which is right next to where the garden is. And it's all going to flow and connect together. Where we have the spouts coming off of our house, it's right next to, or one of them is right next to the compost area so that it can all connect. And we have another one that's going to feed into the garden. So we're trying to make sure all of them are layered and they work together. So we're not dragging stuff all the way across the property.
Right. Yeah, that could take a lot of time to get anything done if you're having to haul everything everywhere.
Yep.
Well, that's really cool. So you landed on 1.5 acres.
Yep.
The layout makes sense. Were there any other factors that you were considering or that made this the right place?
It's out in the country. So it's off the beaten path. It's a small community, but it's a community that you kind of go to the Tractor Supply or go down to the store, and it just feels very friendly and involved. That was another thing that we checked out whenever we did this in every new town that we went to. We made sure we went and ate at the area, went kind of shopping, just walk around the Walmart or the grocery store they had, just kind of see how people interacted with you. There were a few towns that it wasn't bad, but you just didn't get that there was like a community vibe. And that was big, because especially with homesteading, you want to look for that. As far as the house itself, we went from having a mobile home or a double wide that was on pier and beam or runners, whatever you call them. And we wanted to make sure we had a foundation home. As we have so many tornadoes. This season was the scariest season we've probably gone through in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful we're on a foundation home, brick home that has a central area. That was another big factor, because we can't have basements here in East Texas. Our water table's too high. So we had to make sure we had essentially, and to quote Mark Skirdo, who just retired, a windowless interior room to get into for safety. So
that's so important. Yeah. As we're looking for our place, that's one of the things that I'm not finding anywhere because we're looking in Missouri. I'm not finding anywhere where there's a windowless interior room in a lot of the houses and homesteads I've looked at. And I'm like, I'm just going to have to build something like to really have it be what we want. What's that?
They don't have basements there?
Some do, but they all have windows. There's nothing that's interior. And so no matter what I do, I'm going to have to augment it, renovate it, or just build something. And so I'm leaning towards building a small barn dominium style home that's like a third garage and the other 2/3 is living space and prepping storage. But it's interesting because as I look, like I talked to you and I talked to some other of my homesteading friends, and it's like community is one of the things that comes back the most important to me. Well, first, location with water availability. Second is good community. And we're like planning trips to go out and visit again. And my wife's like, we've got to check the communities out. We've got to spend more time there. So like stopping to eat at a local place, talking to the people, like those are the big things that a lot of people don't think about when they start planning to homestead.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just think, I'll just go somewhere as far as I can off grid. Is that efficient? And is that really a good idea? I mean, I look at it and say, away from almost everybody makes absolute sense, but close enough to have a community still, because you don't want to be alone.
100%. And that was one of the things whenever we moved in. So we only have 2 neighbors. If you go down the road, you'll find some more, but it's pretty pretty remote, but you still have those neighbors. And it was really important to me that within our first 2 weeks of actually moving in, that we take them over cupcakes with the girls and just greet them and say hi. So that was one of the first things you do, because you don't know what you don't know is going to happen. And is if you have a neighbor to lean on. Just the other day, we had a neighbor, his elderly father got very, very sick. And so we were able to go talk and see if they needed anything, bring him a casserole. Those are just like neighborly things that you can still do, but be able to watch their house.
Yeah.
Maybe they can watch your goats or your chickens while you go on vacation, establish that, but also lean on each other in emergencies like ice storms. So.
Yeah. If you don't have a network, if you don't connect to the people locally, you don't know what resources are available, and they don't know what you can do either. Like,
yeah.
Shane has a property that's way out in the middle of nowhere, which is his future retirement bug out location. And we talk about it all the time. And what's funny is it got snowed in one time, and he's like, I'll have to dig it out when I get up there. Well, his neighbor, who he'd gotten to know, who was the next parcel down, I think they're all like 6 acres or so, but he went down, the neighbor got in his tractor, came over and plowed his entry, and it was like 3 feet of snow. Plowed the entry. He's like, oh, Shane usually comes up on every other weekend. Cleared everything out for him so that Shane could get in, pull in, turn around, and pull back out without a problem. And then told Shane, hey, if you ever need, just come on over, grab the keys. They're over here, and you can use my tractor. If you don't make those connections, you don't have those options, right? Yep. And now Shane is going to feel obligated. He already does. He's going to feel obligated to be able to help that neighbor when the neighbor needs help or wants help. But that's also the thing about Shane that I love, is he's already going to want to do that anyways, whether you already helped him or not.
Yep.
Like, he's like you and I, like, just jump in and help, be additional hands to make light of whatever work needs to be done. And so if you don't have that relationship, if you don't start with cookies or brownies or cupcakes or something, you're not going to open a good positive experience with those neighbors. And if you need them, you may not be able to count on them if you haven't built that relationship.
Yeah. I think it was the storm.
Vital.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's so vital to build those relationships.
I agree. I was going to share a similar story to Shane. When it was 2021, it was the big ice storm, the Snowmageddon. Everyone knows that one about Texas. We didn't lose power, but our pipes froze. And our neighbors next to us, we had gotten to know, we weren't best friends, but we were kind to one another, cordial, neighborly. They came over with a torch and unfroze our pipes for us before they burst. So thank God, if we hadn't have made that connection, my husband was out there with a hairdryer trying to unfreeze these pipes, and it was not going anywhere because it was so cold. It was in the negatives. Yeah. It was not going to work. So thank God I baked them lots of bread and brought them some hand churned butter. So
nice.
It was good stuff.
That's so awesome. It's so good to have you on the show. Guys, if you aren't already familiar with Cidni and Prepsteader, make sure you go follow her over at facebook.com, the Prepsteader. You can find her on TikTok as well. She's all over the place. She's got a YouTube, again, the Prepsteader. But you've been doing this for a long time. You are one of the most passionate people about living a prepared life on social media. That's genuine to me.
Thank you for saying
watching all your videos, you make everything so calming and make sense and be simple. And that's the thing that drew me to following you. I was like, wow, I need to start canning again. It's been years. I'm going to follow her and see how she does this. And boom, like, I've done some pickles. I've done a few other things, but I'm like, I wouldn't have had the courage to do those again. So without having more space, had I not been watching your videos. So thank you.
No, thank you. That's probably the kindest compliment I've ever gotten. So thank you.
What? Oh, no, we all love you over here. Well, I want to talk to you also about, and I know you might have some other stuff you want to bring up, and I'll give you time for that, but I want to talk to you about your book, because that's about to launch.
Yeah, it is.
No pressure, right?
No pressure. Not at all.
Tell me about your book.
Okay. So rewind back to 2014, 2015, in that time frame. I'd always kind of had a prepper mindset, but my husband and I are getting married and we're about to move across state. And for whatever reason, it's got me triggered all over the place. I am wanting to prep and have bug out bags, and I'm reading everything, and I'm reading the prepper porn. I'm reading all of the scary stuff. So I'm on Amazon buying who knows what at this point. But I bought everything and nothing at the same time because it was junk that didn't actually do anything for our preparedness. And those are all lessons that I learned. So in the book, I start with just kind of going through the funny stuff that we did, how funny those failures were looking back now. And I do that in a way to try to save people those dollars. And especially in this economy, not a lot of people have money to prep. And what they do have, don't waste it on crap that's going to break and it's not going to come in handy. And I kind of paint that story and talk through, think about the type of prepper you want to be and prep accordingly. Don't be the prepper that prepares for hurricanes if you don't live in a hurricane prone area. So you got to think about what type of prepping that you need to do for your family and your lifestyle that you live. Are you someone that's constantly on the road? Great. You probably need some different elements in your car and your bug out bag that you need when you're on the road. If you're not someone that's like me, I'm more home based. I don't need a whole ton, but I have the essentials, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how the book starts. And then it starts walking through, trying to open your mind in areas that you don't necessarily consider prepping. Me, I know back in 2015, even 2017, 2018, I didn't think about my home as much as a prepping point as I do now being a homeowner. I'm not talking about storage and having first aid. I'm talking about having batteries, bulbs, fittings for the plumbing, extra filters that you have ready to go in case something breaks, in case you have, I don't know, something go wrong, that you don't have to run to Lowe's, or maybe it's midnight and you just had a burst pipe in the middle of winter. You can shut off the water, cut that piece out, get all your supplies out, you got it fixed, you're done. That's the kind of approach that some of this takes, is taking the more practical approach to your home is your safeguard. And that's what you want to take care of. Your car is the same way. That's your transportation in case of emergencies, not just for doomsday, for getting to the hospital, getting to a family funeral. These are all things I think about in my guide.
That's awesome. It's funny because we fixate on the disaster that is the most loud in our minds, right?
Yep.
And we can make a lot of mistakes in overall preparedness by just focusing on that disaster. And it's always important to do your own research, but a lot of times you need to vet your sources, vet where you're doing the research. We spent a good $10,000 in prepping that we didn't need to spend.
Oh, no.
We made at least $10,000 worth of mistakes. And I grew up doing this. But when I got married, all of a sudden my situation changed. And so having examples like yours to learn from is going to be helpful for a lot of you guys that are listening right now that may be new to this. Like, the more you can learn from our mistakes, the more money it's going to save you.
Yeah.
And the more of an understanding that you've got this, that you can adopt, the better. Because like Cidni discovered, one of the biggest things is, I don't know how to do that, right? Everyone says, oh, well, I don't know how to do that. So you can figure it out. The person who invented such and such didn't know how to do it until they figured it out. You didn't know how to manage your goat herd until you figured it out. But now you manage your goat herd, your third herd, right? I make money off prepping. I didn't know you could do that 10 years ago. But it's brought back the money that I lost in my mistakes. It's helped me get better stuff that actually makes sense, that's not a waste, that actually makes it so that I'm more self-reliant and I don't have to rely on the big box stores or having a network of hospitals and everything else right next door to me. And as we're about to bounce out of suburbia, like, I'm not worried because we have experience doing things that we didn't know how to do. And that experience is actually 10 times more valuable than the gear.
Yep.
And so I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to this book popping out. And it's an ebook.
Yes.
So it's pretty easy. Everyone can get access to it. We're all on our digital devices all the time. Where do we go to get information? Because it's not launched yet, but where do we go to get information to get on the wait list?
Yeah. So I think that's going to be launched on our Facebook, the Prepsteader Facebook. And I think we're going to offer some sort of discount, maybe a bonus guide for basics to canning, which is something that I put together years ago, but never have actually put together in a guide style. So I think there might be a bonus that comes along with it. I'm not sure, but there's definitely going to be some good stuff that comes out with it.
Awesome. Well, we'll be one of your first groups to buy it. We're excited. As always, I love having you on because you're just a fantastic person, but also you're in the thick. Like, you're actually doing this daily. And people need to see that, because self-reliant living isn't hard. It isn't crazy. It's just different. It's different
Mhm.
prioritization. What are some of the things that you thought before you started homesteading might be a sacrifice, but now you found you're just so glad you do it, or so glad it's different?
So I think right now, because my mind's on milking, because it's something I have to do right after we stop talking to each other today. But I think when I initially took on the cow, it soured me so poorly when it came to milking. I had a very negative, not just the space with the cow that caused some issues, but I think my relationship to maybe having a dairy animal just was sour in general. And I thought it was just too much of a sacrifice. It was too much for me. That's what I left feeling. And so I'm glad that when I stepped back and I started to prioritize scale, not just quantity, but quality and then manageability. Like, how can my family manage this? If I go out of town, can my husband manage this on his own? So it started to look at it that way. It definitely is not a sacrifice. Sacrifice is not the right word. I think you're right. It changes the way that you do things. You plan around it, like milking. It's the first thing I do in the morning when I get the girls fed and get them in their morning routine. And then I go straight out to milk. It's my time. It's my time to just be with the animals. I get to bottle baby, feed my baby, and it's extra fun for me. And when the girls do want to come out with me, it's also time with them and the goats and me and the goats. So it's become my peace time. It's my happy place. So it's not
Oh, that's
so much a
awesome.
job as it is just me hanging out with the goats, because milking is so fast with a goat. So I'll get my 3 girls done in 30 minutes, but I let them eat extra on the stand. So they get extra time. And I'm just sitting there, just talking to
Nice.
them, brushing them, checking their feet, making sure they don't need to be, have their nails cut. So just taking that extra time with them is fun.
Awesome. Well, guys, check out the book. It's A Prepared Life for the Average Family. Check it out. Go over to facebook.com/the Prepsteader. Make sure you're following. Make sure you turn on your notifications so that when she does drop the book and it does launch, you can get it. We will be sharing that from our email list as well, and in our group, so you guys can see it. But please, please, please take advantage of this. Make sure you're following Cidni, because she is a fantastic resource. Um, I don't want to cut you off or make you go milk right now unless you want to, but is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? I know we invited you here, but I don't want to hog the whole time talking about what I want to talk about. Is there stuff that you wanted to share or discuss?
I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about it, like what I would talk about with all that's going. I have a new area or maybe a suggestion that I'll be talking about on my social media because of our move. So I think when we started to prep and can, and we probably have 1,000 jars or more of canned food from gardens and processed animals and stews and things like that. No one at any point in time stopped to think about how we were going to transport all of this from one location to another. And so it took so much time. We lost jars. We didn't lose a ton. We lost jars. So now I'm going to be thinking
Ouch.
through how to strategically do this for people that are going to move. So that's going to be a point of content for the channels, because no one talks about that. And at least not
No,
for me. I never saw anybody talk about it.
nobody talks about portability of it, really anything other than
Mhm.
your bug out bag.
Yeah.
So this will be very, very valuable. I mean, we've got a ton of stuff we're moving. We don't have very many canned things. I've got one whole big 2 by 3 foot shelf space that's all cans.
Yeah.
But I'm like, anytime I move, I shouldn't say cans, all glass bottles. Anytime I move that, yeah, they make me nervous. I don't let my kids move them right now because one of them, yes, the other one, not responsible. He drops everything. But it's like you've got to take that in consideration. There's spillage in anything you do. You're gonna drop things, you're gonna spill things, but like that's a big hurdle to tackle. I mean, 1,000 cans, 1,000 bottles.
Yeah, and that's just the full ones, and that's not even just all that we moved. You had your store-bought cans, your pantry goods that we had stored. Even though they're stored properly, they're still heavy. It was, I think we way underestimated how much we had stored, which is amazing to be able to say, but it was a pain in the butt to actually move. So it took us a while to get everything packed and move safely, and some of it did not make it. So
that's the challenge. Well, guys and gals, make sure you guys tune in because that's going to be exciting to see. And the way that you explain things so smoothly and so thought out, it's going to be fun for everyone to learn right along with what you've gone through. So, guys, make sure you're getting all of her socials, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. It's all the Prepsteader. Easy to find. Go give her a follow. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for doing what you do because it has brought a lot of simplicity to people who thought this was going to be harder than it actually is, to who thought, I can't do that. You've given them hope. My wife talks about canning, even though she hasn't done it yet. She talks about like, well, when I have time, when we move, I'll start canning and I'm going to take Cidni's classes. I'm going to read her stuff. And I'm like, she's a fan and she's only watched 2 of your videos. And so it's like, when that day comes, we're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Plan A, move. Plan B, do everything Cidni's taught. And we're going to be calling you a ton. I'm sure we are. But guys and gals out there in listening land, thank you for tuning in this week and for being here and listening to Cidni. Make sure you give her a follow. Give us a like and share on this one because this is going to be fun to see what we can do as we learn from Cidni with her new book, A Prepared Life for the Average Family. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, just keep prepping.
Keep prepping, guys. Thanks for being on. And guys, we talked about AMP3 at the beginning of the hour. Let's remind you, we've got a special deal going on right now. Talking about moving things around, I found one of the best ways to move stuff, especially water. If I'm in a survival situation, you need to have something that's easy to carry. And I found the Survival Frog dry bag is also a really good survival water bag. Super lightweight, easy to use. You can stack them in your bags and you can use those to port anything. If you're in a scavenger situation, they can go a long way and it'll keep your electronics dry. And then when you're done with those, if you want to put them somewhere else, maybe an EMP hit, doesn't matter anymore. Use those dry bags as wet bags. It's fantastic. Go use the code Prepper Talk and save 10% at checkout on anything you buy site-wide over at survivalfrog.com. Until next time, stay ready-minded, have a great day, and keep on prepping, as Cidni just said.